development charity Intermediate Technology. The record was first set 3 years ago by two brothers from Cumbria who raised more than £100,000 for the charity. Our next news is at 6:25, but now back to Vivian White.
Her Majesty the Queen is now in Vancouver for the Commonwealth Conference, which begins on Tuesday. There she'll not be monarch of all she surveys, but the head of the family, in which once again there's an embarrassing family row this year from a most unlikely quarter. Fiji, a self-governing member of the Commonwealth which recognised the Queen as head of state for 17 years, has seen the overthrow of its elected government and the humiliation of the Queen's representative, the Governor-General, Ratu Sapanayo Ganilau. The new ruler, Colonel Rambuka, has declared the country a republic, and the former Prime Minister, Ratu Sekamizeze Mara, who lost power in those elections, has pursued Her Majesty to Vancouver to try to get the Commonwealth, after all, to see things more flexibly and not to expect the Paradise Islands to be too perfect. For most of us who've never been there, Fiji meant just paradise in the South Pacific. But Fiji's public fall from grace with the first coup in May, which we found so shocking, had its origins in our empire, the period of British colonial rule. In the 19th century, to satisfy the sweet tooths of Europeans, settlers imported Indian labour into Fiji to help work the sugarcane plantations. When on the 10th of October 1874, Fiji became a British colony, Queen Victoria added to the empire a country in which the seeds of racial tension had already been sown. And the Indians, British Empire imports as it were, began steadily to outnumber the indigenous population. When Queen Elizabeth II first visited the islands in 1953 as Queen of Fiji, they apparently reverted to romantic type. It looked a perfect picture book visit by the young monarch to a picture book loyal colony. But by 1970, when her son, Prince Charles, came to the islands as her representative to grant them independence, the Indian population outnumbered the indigenous Fijians. Britain dealt with this latent racial problem by allowing an independence constitution deliberately weighted in favour of the Fijians.
The 1970 constitution provides for a Westminster system of government in which the representation is by race, and the Fijians and the Indians each have 22 seats, even though the Indians slightly outnumber the Fijians. The main consequences are, one, that the political parties have tended to be based on race. The two parties are the Alliance Party, which represents Fijian interests by and large, and the National Federation Party, which represents Indian interests. The second consequence is that the election times are very fraught, time of great tension, because the electoral politics revolve around racial claims to power. The third consequence is that the party which wins the elections gets into power through the cabinet, and the other community is completely left out of power, and there is no adequate system of power sharing.
Ratu Mara, leader of the predominantly Fijian party, stayed in power for 17 years. Then a predominantly Indian but multiracial Labour Party, led by a Fijian, Dr. Timoche Bavandra, in coalition with the Indian National Federation, won this April's elections. On May the 14th, Colonel Rambuka staged the first of his coup, demanding Fijian power within the country. Indians responded by rioting, burning the sugarcane fields. Prime Minister Bavandra refused to acknowledge the new ruler.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm still Prime Minister of this country. That's right.
He was kidnapped, then released, and came to London to seek the support of the Crown. He saw her private secretary, Sir William Heseltine, and returned no better off to Fiji. There then followed months of negotiations in Fiji between the political parties, but a second coup in September put paid to them. The Colonel wants no compromise, but Fiji for the Fijians.
I hereby proclaim that as from this day forth, Fiji is declared a republic.
Her Majesty is now in Vancouver. Colonel Rambuka may reapply now for his country to be readmitted to the Commonwealth as a republic. He may be refused. Last night in Vancouver, our North America correspondent Martin Bell spoke to the Commonwealth Secretary-General, Sir Sonny Ramphal, first about the Fiji situation.
the Commonwealth is troubled by the racial overtones that underpin this issue in Fiji. So, as of now, where we are, it's difficult to avoid the conclusion that one way or another, Fiji is going to be talked about in Vancouver.
And what status will Fiji have here?
Again, we must talk as of now. Today, Fiji is a Commonwealth member. Commonwealth countries recognize the Governor-General as the legitimate executive authority in Fiji. Given that situation, Fiji could be at the conference depending on the representation that the Governor-General might send forward. Colonel Rambuka and his regime have no place at Vancouver. He can have no place if the regime is not recognized by definition, and by definition, if he becomes a republic without having been readmitted to membership, he couldn't either. So it's the Governor-General or his people or nothing.
With us now in New York is Mr. Edward Heath, the former British Prime Minister, and in Washington, Dr. Kaunda, the President of Zambia. Mr. Heath, may I ask you first of all, when your government first came to power in 1970, one of its first but little noticed acts was to pass through the British House of Commons the bill that made Fiji independent, though there was no vote or debate about it at the time. Did anyone ever see this coming, Mr. Heath?
Well, the problem has been known about for a very long time indeed. And I well remember, as probably does President Kaunda and certainly Sonny Ramphal will, that in the Commonwealth Conference in Singapore in 1971, Ratumara himself explained to many of us exactly what the problems were of carrying out the motion which the Commonwealth Conference passed about equality between all races, and of course about one man, one vote. So that this is not entirely unforeseen. I think what is important at the moment is that we should make an entirely rational, unemotional analysis of this position, and that we should then take a realistic view of that analysis. And I think the analysis is quite clear. The other thing which I hope they will do in Vancouver is not to take any steps which are going to prevent helpful developments in the future. There's always a tendency for the Commonwealth to want to step in immediately, especially if other people's business is concerned, and take steps which then prove very difficult to retrace. And so I hope the Commonwealth Conference in Vancouver will be very sensible and restrained about this. It's not the major item on the agenda. Tonight, or today, you've been using melodramatic language about it all, but it's one incident, and the items on the agenda which the Commonwealth ought to be dealing with are